This event occurred about 10 years ago. My cousin and I were both 9 years of age at the time. Naturally, as boys do, we would have sleepovers filled with sports, video games, and Nerf gun battles. The crazy thing about this experience is that it occurred in broad daylight in my friend's backyard. We were playing a game of one-on-one wiffle ball and had plastic bases set out for the game. Somewhat important detail. We were playing a game of one-on-one. Well, in the middle of the game, a beat-up red pickup truck, maybe an older Ford Ranger, pulls right into his neighbor's driveway. Just a brief note to put this into context. At that time, my cousin lived in a very safe development, whose only traffic came from the residents of it. My cousin's family's driveway was about 10 feet apart from his neighbor's driveway, and was probably about 70 feet long. My cousin's family's driveway was about 10 feet apart from his neighbor's driveway, and was probably about 70 feet long. His backyard had no fencing at the time. This meant that we could walk right onto his neighbor's property unhindered. Back to the story. I lived over an hour away, so I just assumed this truck pulling into the driveway was his neighbor. In the driver's seat was a man who had a rough beard and was probably in his mid to late 40s. He parked his car at the edge of the neighbor's driveway, maybe 20 feet from where we were. He proceeded to roll down his window and said in a not too loud voice, "Have you seen my lost puppies?" My cousin noped the heck right out of there and ran to his house about 50 feet away. I was probably 5 seconds behind him, but I remember what I did very vividly. Instead of immediately following my cousin, I politely said no, I had not seen them. I guess I was lucky hearing him ask the question the first time and didn't move closer to his truck. Then, for whatever reason, my 9-year-old brain decided that it would only be right for me to clean up our equipment if we were done playing, so I could quickly scoop up the bases, wiffle ball and baseball bat, and ran inside just after my cousin did. We were easily able to get into the kitchen where my aunt was, through the sliding glass door facing the backyard, and obviously it would have been too risky for the man to have followed us back to the house. We were freaked out by the whole occurrence, stayed inside the rest of the day, but tried coming to grips with the possibility that maybe he really did lose his dogs. However, thinking back on it, I now realize that this is one of the most common baits used in trying to abduct children, and that we too could have been kidnapped had it not been for my cousin's immediate instinct to run. Number 2. This was probably just under 15 years ago. I don't exactly remember how old I was, but I was somewhere between the age of 5 and 7. My nanny lives just around the corner from my house, so I would go and stay with her on Tuesdays and the weekends. My mom always dropped me off since I didn't start walking to and from school until I was about 11. I was in the living room with my grandma playing with my baby dolls that were quite a bit old. They weren't Barbie dolls. They were more of the dolls that collectors have, with plastic heads with a stuffing body, and they're quite large. I know it sounds a bit strange for me to bring this up, but one of the 2 dolls was black. As far as I'm aware, they aren't actually that many black dolls. It was sort of strange for me to have one. Whenever my friends came over, they would comment on it, saying they don't have a black doll. I hear a knock on the door, which is expected as my grandma told me earlier. She was expecting some people to come over. I don't remember the exact words, but I'll say I remember it quite well. My grandma: "Are you from British Gas?" Her boiler was having troubles. British Gas was who she was expecting. The man: "Yes, I'm from British Gas." After that, he walked into my home with no tools or anything. He followed my grandma and looked at the boiler. I was still playing with my dolls. I didn't take any notice of him. He was poking around saying how this looks fine, or how that looks a bit weird, but evidently he didn't know what he was talking about. He was making it all up. After a few minutes he came out. The boiler was right next to the living room, so I guess he had been watching me play. He came over to me and kneeled in front of me. Again, I know it's weird to mention this, but he was Asian, I think. All I remember was that he had dark skin, but it wasn't too dark. Again, I don't remember all the exact words, but I remember the important ones. The man. Are you playing with your dollies? Me. Yes. The man. You know, it's very special to have a black dolly. They're very rare. It's nice that you have one. He started picking up my dolls and looking at them. As a kid, I was very protective of my stuff. I also had anxiety, so this was shaking me up a bit. I didn't know what I was feeling since I had never learned about anxiety, but that was it. From this moment on, I said nothing. He put down my dolls and started to pick up my hands. You have very nice hands. They're soft. He was caressing them, running his fingers through them. Have you heard of henna? This would make your hands very pretty. Again, making patterns on my hands. It's something girls get. You should get some. That's all I can remember. I think he stood up after that, or my grandma told him to leave. My grandma hadn't said anything from what I remember, and I don't remember seeing her anywhere. I think she may have been calling my mom since she came around in the next few minutes after he had left. She made sure I was okay, checked the dolls, etc. We called the police. A while later, British Gas did come, and opening the door they announced they were British Gas, but my grandma could ask. My mom was there and she asked for some ID. They had some. We let them in and they fixed the boiler. I don't remember if it was later that day or the next day when the police came, but I remember them questioning me. My mom and my grandma were filling in details of things that I wouldn't remember, like how he had no ID or tools. I had to explain he liked my hands and thought they were soft and prettier with henna. I remember my mom looking horrified. So to touchy-feely home intruder/kidnapper, let's never meet again. Number 3. This happened back when I was 17 and living in a small rural village. I'd been at a friend's all evening watching films and chilling. I left to go home around 11 p.m. It was quite a long walk back to my house, as she lived on the outskirts of the village down some back roads. I felt relatively safe, as when it got to a certain time of the night, it was quiet. You wouldn't bump into anyone, and there would have hardly been any cars on the road, especially at that late hour. It was weirdly peaceful. Where I lived was a large avenue with 2 big blocks of houses like 2 big circles that you would get to after following a small dark road that consisted of a few large old houses and vicarage. As I'm passing the vicarage, I see this little beat-up red Nissan coming towards me. The closer it gets, the more it slows down, and the guy is nearly breaking his neck trying to look at me. I mean, there was nothing subtle about it. It nearly came to a full stop as it drew alongside me, and I started to panic. There was not another soul about, just me and this strange guy. I was determined not to get myself into a tiz, so I picked up the pace and refused to look at him. As far as I know, he drove off. I continued walking home, which was literally a 5-minute straight line from there, and I kept listening out for a car engine, and was vigilant of any headlights creeping up behind me. I heard nothing and saw nothing, so I breathed a sigh of relief as I could now see my house. I walked in and locked the door, saw my mom standing in the living room, chatting on the phone. I'm trying to interrupt her conversation, telling her about the weird guy in the red car, when for some reason she goes to the front door and peeks through the curtains. She takes the phone from her ear and says, "What's that car?" This is all in a minute since walking through the door, and I'm thinking to myself, it can't be him, because if he would have followed me, I would have heard the car. Before I even get a chance to look for myself, there's a knock on the front door. So I go and answer it, only pulling it open a few inches. And there's this guy who stood there empty-handed wearing a baseball hat. It was the same guy, the same car. I say, "Can I help you?" "Did you order pizza?" He asks me, and I'm like, no, I think you have the wrong house. Taking a step towards me, he says again in a not fucking around kind of tone, no, I said, did you order a pizza? Before I reply, my mom has come up behind me and opened the door fully and says, is there a problem? This causes him to back up mumbling, I must have the wrong house, before he gets in his car and takes off. Sure to say we were both a bit spooked, made sure everything was locked up properly. So to the stealthy alleged pizza guy who stalked me home, let's not meet again. Number 4. This happened about 8 years ago when I was in high school. For contextual purposes, I'm a girl and I was from a totally safe neighborhood. I came home from school one afternoon around 4. My brother was at soccer practice, and both my parents were at work, so I expected to be home alone for at least 1.5 to 2 hours. I let the dog out and sat down in the living room to watch TV, which was around the corner from the front door, which was not even close in my line of sight. About 10 minutes after I got home, I heard the front door open and close, immediately weird because I was not expecting anyone home. I went to see who it was. Inside my house, standing with his back to me, was a delivery man. He was facing the front door, standing about 6 inches from it. His nose had to be practically touching the front door. I said, "What are you doing?" He turned around and said, "Oh, is this not a business?" I said no. It was very clearly a house, so I started freaking out. I asked him to leave and he put the package on the ground and left. I start to call my dad when I hear my dog barking to be let in. I open the door and she comes in absolutely panicked. All her hair is standing up and she's coughing so much, practically choking, like someone grabbed her forcefully by the collar and dragged her. She's not big, barely barks, and super friendly. I'm freaking out. I take my dog and lock us in the basement and called my dad. I wish this story had a better ending, but nothing ever came of it. I'll never forget him standing with his back to me inside my house. Creepy as fuck. This just happened about 20 minutes ago. I just moved back home with my parents after a divorce, and they live sort of in the woods away from the main roads. My old house that I just moved from was in the next town over and on a main road, so if you called the cops, they would be there in 2 seconds. Here it takes a little bit longer sometimes. I'm having coffee on the couch. My daughter is playing on the floor. We're the only ones home right now. I walk out into the kitchen to make more coffee. I pass by the dining room window, which looks out onto the road in front of the house. I see a man come walking up the road, which is kind of weird because it's such a private area that you don't ever really see cars or people unless they live here. So I watch him coming up slowly up the road, and then he stops in front of the neighbor's house, starts staring, then back over his shoulder. He does this a few times before I'm like, okay. I slink out into the entryway and lock the front door. I walk back into the kitchen, and he's still looking at my neighbor's house. I go into the back room and retrieve a gun, and I stay watching him out the window, but out of sight. Then I watch him move forward and stop at our driveway. My daughter is still watching TV in the living room as I kept looking back at her and back at him. I take my cell phone out and call 911 and say that I think someone is about to try to break in, and I give them the address. They said they were sending someone as soon as possible to keep the doors locked. I put my phone in my back pocket still on, and then I heard 2 loud thumps on the front door, then again. So I calmly walk over to the window next to the door and open it, pointing the gun at the man. He steps back and goes, wrong house. So I say, yeah, wrong house, and I keep it pointed at him. He stares at me for a moment which felt like 20 minutes before turning around and leaving. I could still see him in view when the cops pulled up, so I pointed and they went and got him. They said they found a lot of drugs on him and 2 knives in his pocket, along with some money, so he's probably up to no good. Thanks for watching, guys. Please make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe for further content. I hope everyone's weekend is going well. If you guys want to share any of your stories, be sure to email them to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. My email is located in the info box or in the About Me section on my YouTube page. Don't be a stranger. Be sure to follow me on Twitter as well. It's @sinfulsavant. Until we meet again, stay sinful.